Welcome, my friends. I'm here showing up, having inspiration to talk. So I am, and apparently I'm having an accent. How do you write a book? What? Are you writing a book? I wrote a book, you guys. I wrote this book, Awaken You from Pain to Healing, a woman's way of waking up to her life. Okay, where do you start? Where do you even start when it comes to writing a book? Well, it all starts with an idea. We all get these grandiose things like Elizabeth Gilbert wrote in her book Big Magic. They're like these floating things in the universe. And I always find that these big ideas come when I am like moving. I'm like doing yoga or walking or hula hooping or in the shower. With the shower is always these miraculous moments because the shower is like when our brain is almost in that like deep meditative state. I think it's the theta wave state. I need to research that. But those are when they come. So you get this idea like, oh my gosh, I want to write a book. Like I've always just like felt this calling to help people because I was really lost, still on my journey finding. I'm not saying I'm found, but I have like learned all of these things and I have so much information and it almost like makes me feel overwhelmed holding it inside of this and I need to get it out. So I had this idea for a book, but it wasn't this book. It was like a different version. So you have to have the ideas. And some people like to write an outline. If you're like a really cool, organized person, rock on. But if you're like most of us writers, you will find yourself with all of these ideas. And you might just like one night sit down and just like get on a document. Or if you are a handwriter, I like to handwrite a lot, just like vomit everything out. I'm actually reading this book and my podcast mate and I, Sarah Caton, are getting ready to interview this incredible woman who wrote a book all about self-editing, and she calls it the vomit draft. That's just like getting everything out, or even just like having the ideas of like what every chapter is going to be like. I'm not like that. I literally just intuitively like let what comes and then I put it out and I put it out and I put it out. The problem with that can be that it is just like a nightmare to edit, which is fine. But you have to have the idea first. And then you have to get it out. You literally have to write. You have to take time to write. Because if you don't take time to write, then your book will never be born. And then it will be like this book, which is fine. But it took me like 6 years. 6 years. That's like a really long time. I see some authors who put out like 6 books a year. I'm like, dang. I think once you get in that flow, it's easier. But it can be hard in the get-go to get the motivation. And then, so like, yeah, you have to take the time to write. So you have to make writing a habit and a priority. And even if you have a full-time job, most writers have full-time jobs. Like I have my kids full-time. I teach them homeschool. I'm doing Voices Rising Press. I'm making malas. I'm showing up on here. I am like a multifaceted, high energy lady doing all the things all the way around. Extra full-time job. Blah, blah, blah. Trying to keep it together. How do you keep it together, Shelley, you may ask? I don't know. My hair looks like this sometimes. That's what happens. Right? So, come up with the idea. And then some people like to title their books right away. This book's title has changed 3 times. And I will tell you, writing the tagline was almost as hard as writing the ding dang book. I literally for like 2 weeks was like on this like tagline. So if you have this like miraculous idea for your book and you have all of these really good ideas for titles, like write those down. And if you have really good ideas for your tagline, write them down too. But this book has had so many different taglines, but I had to finally land, and it was literally way different than anything that I would have thought. So it's From Pain to Healing, a woman's way of waking up to her life. So this book is targeted for women. Right? Ooh, I should back up my role. Like, I don't think that I should back up my role because there's a lot of really famous writers out there who will agree with me on this and this was really hard though. I need to remind myself is that when I first started writing, I got so lost in researching my target market and my genre and my that I was like forgetting like why I was writing. And like, first, I'm writing this for me, man. Like all good writers are writing for themselves. They're writing their story. this is nonfiction. If you're a fiction writer, you might be writing to get out of your head and jump around, but this is nonfiction. So this is a self-help memoir, which I even had people tell me, like, lose the memoir part, keep the self-help part, lose blah, blah, blah. Yeah, they were telling me to pick one or the other. I couldn't land, and I'm not like that. I'm such a, like, a butterfly, and I wanted this book to be part memoir because stories help people connect to us. I think that it's really powerful to tell someone my experience and then what I've learned from it, and then kind of like rounding out like what I learned from it and what you can learn from it and possibly grow from it, versus just like me shoving all of my information at you. Because one of the drafts was a shover and it just didn't feel right. So, how do you write a book? We have so many things, right? And I think this part of how to write a book was like, who are you writing this for? And I always think of like your closest people that are struggling, or yourself, right? I think of two. I wrote this book for myself and I wrote it for my sisters. And this book, like I said, it's targeted for women. And I address my people in this book as my sisters, and it's capital MY and then sisters, because I have sisters. I am one of 5 sisters, so 4 sisters I have. And then I just have like this infinite web of soul sisters that I just like meet. And I knew that I had to write this book targeted towards that. And it's funny, like some men are like, oh, I can't read that. Well, yeah, you can, because it's like a realistic story. And I also think that if a man feels like they want to connect better with like their daughters or their wives or mothers or the women around them, that literature is like a great way for you to learn that, right? Right? Reading other people's stories and like figuring women out. There's so many things. Yeah. Howing to writing a booking. So what's another step, right? It's again, showing up to write. Showing up to write, even when you don't want to write. Sometimes even you're showing up to write to just like sit there and see what happens. And oh, this was again from Elizabeth Gilbert. Was this Elizabeth Gilbert or Glennon? Nope, Elizabeth Gilbert. She says like she kind of like romances her inspiration and her creativity, and she'll like get all fancy, do her hair, never wears lipstick but put on lipstick, and like show up to her computer like she's gonna go on a date, like if you're not feeling inspired. And sometimes too, getting inspired to write comes from not writing. What? How can it come from not writing? It comes from not writing because you can sit in your boring writing space, like you can love all your things in your space and connect to it, but if you're showing up and you're just like, oh, I have no energy, I'm feeling low, blah, blah, maybe we need to go outside and have a walk. Maybe you need to take a yoga class. Maybe you need to put on yourself a mala, get some like healing energy, pick up a crystal, shift how you're feeling, maybe run up and down the stairs a few times, get yourself a water, drink a cup of hot tea. If you're a coffee drinker, drink coffee. Sometimes reaching for that sugary afternoon granola snack. I like to do that sometimes. Yeah, that can be a good thing to do. So there's different things to like invite our creativity. And I think too, a good question to ask yourself is like, what are you feeling called to write about? Like, what like makes you feel excited and gets like your heart pumping and makes you feel like, oh my God, I have to write about this. Like, what is it? Don't write a book or a story or even a blog about something that you're not interested in. I know that there's a lot of people with like big college degrees, which is awesome. I don't come from that are researchers and do that, which is awesome. Like I freaking love Brene Brown's work. I love the work of but Kristen Neff, PhD. She's a PhD, an amazing researcher. But what I really love about these women is they're not just giving you all the facts. They're actually showing you realistic, like they're showing you their stories too, and it helps you connect to them. So I know for me sometimes like I can read some like research and I can get really overwhelmed. And I know that Sean Stevenson's book he wrote, Sleep Smarter, which is a great book, and Eat Smarter, but it does have like so much information that it overwhelms me, and then I'm like, I don't know what he's talking about. So then I have to like slow my roll and be like, okay, I know that this information is here for this purpose and I can take what I want. So Write what excites you, because it is tedious. It is arduous. It takes a really long freaking time. And even just like, if you are writing for yourself to write for yourself, that's amazing. But if you're writing because you want to share your heart with the world, you can. And you can query, you can look for literary agents and publishing houses, which I have done many, many of years. Like for 6 years, I reached out until I just decided that I'm going to pause on that. Like, who knows? Who knows my mission? Right now, I have my own self-publishing company, Voices Rising Press, with my soul sister, who is also a writer. She's writing an incredible, beautiful memoir called Deconstructed. So good. So many amazing things. That, yeah, you just have to show up where life is and what life is giving you. And I always think that it's like that saying of like, you're trying to like swim up a raging river and it's just pushing you back down. Try to pay attention to that. And then you're writing too, when you're writing your book, like, is it feeling like you're fighting against that book? Maybe that idea, maybe you need to move along, or maybe you need to kind of like slightly shift directions, right? Okay. So how do you write a book? You actually take the time, you write the book, you get inspired when you can. When you're not inspired, it doesn't mean that you're not a writer. It means that you have a different purpose that day. So do what you need to do. Sometimes you need to clean your house, clean out your closet, organize your drawers, go meet a girlfriend for a cup of tea, take your dogs on a walk, play with your kids, watch a movie, shift what you're doing so then you can get the inspiration to write. And then, my friends, you write. And when you are feeling inspired, you write your butt off. You literally write. And I am a huge advocate of sleep, but if you wake up at 1 o'clock in the morning and you have like, oh my gosh, you get your butt to your computer, you get your butt to your journal by your bed. Always keep a journal by your bed. Always keep a journal in your backpack, and you write that business, because you have got to write your book. And you do that. And then after you write it, you give it like a little break. You give it like, maybe, some people say a week. I think a month sometimes can be too much, because I have found when I wait a month, then it's like 2 months or 3 months. And then I'm like, oh my God, my book has been in dust for a year. And then I like forgot about it. So take a little break, but don't take too long. And then just read it. Maybe read all of your stuff. And this is so cool because Microsoft Office now, and I definitely recommend that you pay for the premium, because it just has all of these extra features and it's super cool. But my favorite is that there's a read to me. So it's a computer voice. There's like the David or Zara. There's like an older woman who sounds a little bit like she was a smoker, and then like a younger, hipper, not super robot-y, but not as robot-y as some voices, as like Siri on the iPhone, but it will read to you. And you can just like hear. So I like to just like listen to what I wrote and like be like, that's interesting. And don't judge yourself. Just listen and just hear it. And then what I like to do after I get all of that out is go in and like fix all of your spelling, because that emotional or that like vomit draft just has like all of the mistakes and spelling errors. So get your spelling all tidied up. And then this is what I do, is I go chapter by chapter, and then all of a sudden I will just have these like poof epiphanies, and then I will just rewrite. And sometimes I'll just rewrite everything and then copy it and delete it. Or sometimes I'm just adding to it. So you just are kind of like taking it one step at a time, and that editing. And then you're starting to edit, right? And then that's a process on its own. It's just like editing and figuring out how to be a good editor. And I would say I would go over yourself at least 3 times before you even ask a friend to read your book, because usually it's kind of like a hot mess and it needs some love. But if you have someone who loves you and is like supportive of reading your stuff, be like, please help me read this. And you have to be open for constructive criticism and feedback here. You can't be all defensive. This is one thing I've learned. A lot of writers, which I used to be one of them, are like, that's my baby. And you're like holding on to like this like sentence, and you're like holding on to it. And then maybe later you read it and you're like, oh, that doesn't even make sense. Or does it belong there? And when I hired a professional editor, she was so cool, and she told me, make a cuts box. It could be a box. It's not really a box, but a file, a folder. And you highlight, copy, delete, and then open the next file, paste. 64 pages I deleted from this book. Dude, this book, I said, dude, I'm literally turning into my 10-year-old son. He's not 10 quite yet, but is 278 pages. I took out 70 pages, but I actually rewrote and added like 60. So there you go. But isn't that interesting? You have to be willing to say goodbye, and you can't be so defensive, because this is what I always think. Sometimes it just like takes all of the blah, 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 the talking and the writing to get to like the meat and the good stuff that you want to say, right? And it can take years to craft our writing skills and figure out our voice, right? So this book, what voice, what perspective do I write it in? Well, it's interesting because sometimes I write it in like the past tense when I'm telling a story. So the beginning of the chapters have a story. Sometimes I'm writing in the past tense, and sometimes I bring you into the present tense. And that's just how I write. And my editor wasn't sure about it at first. And then she was like, you know what? That could be your thing. That could be your style. And something I say in my book is to feel your feelings. Like, you have to feel your feelings to heal from them. And she says, that doesn't really make sense, but that could be your thing. And I'm like, well, that is, because my premise of healing is that you have to feel what's going on inside of you to move through it and to heal through it. So it was interesting. Okay, there's so many things, but I would just recommend that if you want to write a book, what do you got to do? Well, like I said, you get that idea and then you have to run with it, and you actually have to write it. You have to get those ideas down, right? And you don't have to worry about like the title and the subheading, because that will come at the end. But you just, girl, boy, you just write it. You write it, you write it, you write it, you write it, and you keep writing. You write your heart out. And then you put it away. And then you listen to it. Maybe you could listen to it, or maybe you could read it. Just read it and just hear it. And if it strikes your interest, awesome. If not, let it go, right? And then after that, right, then that is what we're talking about, beta readers and getting people's perspective and feedback. And that can be like kind of like a, and you can take or leave your beta readers' perspectives. You can take or leave what they say. It helped so much in crafting and changing this book. But there was a lot of things I had to just say, thank you, but no thank you. And then the biggest thing that was so helpful that I pushed off for so many years, because it was a huge expense, was actually finding and hiring a professional editor. Because I went through like 3 people where it just like fell through. And I really believe that the universe brings everything to us exactly as it needs to be. And those other editors weren't right for me. And I had to pan out the big old dollies. This book was almost $1,800 to edit. So I did like the full shebam. I'm trying to think of the developmental. It was $6.50 a page. She did do like a light line edit for like $2.50 a page, and then like an intermediate for $4.50 a page. And I thought, to make this book the best it can be, I really want to hear what the editor has to say. I want to see how she's feeling. I want to see if she thinks chapter 1 needs to be in chapter 3 or 18. And I literally did. I moved around like out of 21 chapters, I think I moved like 14 chapters, and the flow is like boom, spot on. It's like incredible, right? And then after that is I did have one more person go through it and to just find still like some sentences that just didn't make sense. After the big editor, I had one person that I know is a very avid reader, and she worked for a principal for like 20, 30 years and just knows emails and knows structure. And she was great. And she helped me one last boom bam. And then I had to hire a typesetter. That was somebody who came inside and she put all of this together, even though that was kind of like a pain in my butt crack, that It was hard, and I actually learned how to format myself because I'm really impatient with people. And I went through, again, 3 typesetters. And maybe it's because I'm so picky, but you know what? Being picky made this book the best book that it can be. It didn't make this book what I didn't want it. Oh, and P.S. Doi, the title of the book. I mean, the cover. I hired a girlfriend who does graphic design to make this beautiful. And it's not at all what I pictured, but it's incredible. And it's my artwork. It's that painting. And she also, I drew up all of these little logos, and she, not logos, designs, and she literally turned my pictures and she just like put them in on her iPad and then made them all detailed and gorgeous and like amazing. I literally like drew them and brought them to life. So yeah, there are so many things. And then you want to write a book, and then it was following through with publishing. This video is really long. I apologize, but there's so many things to say. And then it's following through and like pushing it to publish. Amazon is the biggest place to publish. That is where I have right now, Amazon and the ebook. And I also have Kobo Books. I'm working on Apple Books still. Apple Books, Google Books. I have it on Google Books, just the ebook, obviously. And I'm still working on, I'm going to be publishing it hardback on Ingram Sparks. Ingram Sparks costs $50 for an upload. Amazon's great because I have re-uploaded this book 4 times. That would have cost me $200 extra. So I'm doing all of this first and getting it done. And then I'm going to move along. So anyways, it's publishing. These are some of the tips. I mean, there's a lot of things, but I just wanted to share with you from blank page to publishing of like how you can do it, but you can do it. I did it, and I hope that there are some tips that you picked up on. I love you. I'm grateful for you. I will see you back here very soon.